Okay, just point to hand over then now to a presentation on compliance software and technology. So has anyone ever said to you, it's never happened if it wasn't written down? I believe we heard that phrase this morning. Some may nostalgically look back to a period when my word is my bond, but the assurance that bonds provide seems to have been devalued over time. Requirements for governance, systems and controls, the right culture, into external inspection, they all feed an environment in which firms need to demonstrate their ability to comply, not just comply. I'd like now to ask Bill Mulligan, CEO of Cordium, he is here, good, to come to the stage to just talk to us about software and technology and how that can help meet the compliance challenge.
Great, thanks a lot, John. So what we're going to talk today is we're going to try to talk generally about the use of software and technology for purposes of maintaining, monitoring, and running a compliance program. I'm not going to really speak specifically about Cordium tools, although I'll touch on them at the end. And really sort of go through a couple of things. One, we'll go through sort of just the Cordium experience of how we came about to using it. And I think it's important notes there to think about when you're thinking about using software or technology in a compliance program. Talk a little bit about globalization and how software and technology can play a big role there with the increasing complexity around globalization. I'll then go through some headline benefits that I'll call that we've experienced and that you should be looking for when thinking about using software or technology in a compliance program. Then we'll get into some specifics and talk about two real important factors, organization and formalizing accountability. And then we'll go through some very specific tasks, which are a bit US-centric, I would say, where we think you can look at using software and technology to a great degree. So with that, we'll get started. Sort of, I guess the big question is, sort of how did we come to this place? The Cordium software technology originated in the U.S. In one of the U.S. predecessor company to Cordium. And we realized really early on, I'd say pretty darn close to day one, not exactly day one, but probably day 215 or something, but it was year one that we needed to find a solution to keep track of all the type of different work we were doing. And at first, and actually for the majority of the life of the application, it is an internal tool. We used it primarily to help service clients to stay on top of various compliance programs for hundreds of clients. And only very recently did we go out and sell it as, quote unquote, a third-party tool. The one thing I would say, and I think I've seen it in other applications, I've not seen it in other applications, but one of the most important takeaways from that spot is when you're thinking about it, go to a firm that has experts in both areas. In both areas, I mean compliance consultants, people who live, breathe, helping people run compliance program, and experts in software development. One or the other just doesn't work. We at Cordium, we have a large internal development team, coders, 10 coders that work at the firm that spend all day long developing. They have intimate relationships, and I don't mean intimate, but intimate relationships with their compliance colleagues so they can talk about problems, issues, thoughts. It's hand in hand. We've seen some other software firms where they've only had one or the other, and something's missing along the way. So that's just sort of an introductory piece. Before I get into the headline benefits, one thing to think about, and I think it's a concept that has permeated a number of the panels today, is just the increasing international regulatory pressure. It's getting more and more complex. We've got firms, and as you can see, if you look at the geographic locations of Cordium, that are active in London, New York City, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malta, as we announced today. I'm very happy to do so. So you've got to deal with FCA-related issues. In the U.S., it could be SEC, CFTC, FINRA. In Hong Kong, it could be the SFC. In Singapore, the MAS. So we've got just a really complex regulatory regime, and using software to really help you map out what you need to do office by office, location by location, and also identify overlap, where you can do things more efficiently because you're doing very similar functions in different jurisdictions. So it's a very, very important piece. Now let's sort of talk about just general headline benefits of compliance automation. One thing that we have noticed, and I think we've talked about it again, it being a little bit US-centric, is the importance of keeping and evidencing you're doing what you say you're doing from a compliance perspective. For those of you who were on the first session of the day, that was a running theme among all the panelists that spoke with me about the ability to clearly evidence that the tasks were being done. And when you're doing that in sort of disparate fashion, sort of emails and spreadsheets and Word documents and whatnot, it gets very difficult. Things can get lost. If you use software tools that have a centralized record-keeping approach and a detailed record-keeping approach about who did what when, that is an important thing to think about. The other big thing that you need, and you should be looking when you're looking at software tools that are out there, will it help you tell your story to a regulator? We built the application that we built with the very thought process that we were going to use it with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then the CFTC, and then FINRA, and then the FCA, and then the SFC, and now the MAS. So we think about it in that way, that it will be a tool that will help us tell the story, convincingly tell the story that you're sensitized to your compliance program, sensitized to compliance risks, and we can demonstrate things were done and archive it. Security and archiving is of the utmost importance. What are some other benefits? Obviously, it should be an application that's got content, so it can actually help you keep up on an ever-changing regulatory environment. There are choices between applications that have content and those that are quote-unquote open architecture, where you've got to keep up the content yourself. There should be some element of content to help you keeping up with the changing world. It should also be an application that greatly saves a tremendous amount of time as it relates to the operation of the compliance program. It allows you to focus other times on your business. We, over the years, have realized how true that is because it's allowed us to run our business that much more efficiently. We talked about it at the first session of the day, that there's a lot of overlap between what regulators are looking for and what investor due diligence requests are. So these tools should be used, just like other tools that you may have in your software arsenal, to handle investor due diligence inquiries. And most importantly, again, it gets back, it should allow for easier reporting, both internal and external. So if you can create a report that demonstrate what personal securities transaction were filed during a particular quarter, what exceptions were noted, who reviewed it, what day was it reviewed, and what time was it reviewed. Again, reporting is a key thing. What are some other headline benefits? Obviously, it should help. It should be a tool that's used on a day-to-day basis. It should help you manage compliance responsibilities on a daily basis. It should also help you deal with employee-related issues, and I'll spend time a little bit later when we talk about specific tasks, the importance of and reducing some of the complexities around monitoring employees, as well as monitoring risks. The other thing that's important that you should be looking for is a tool, a software application that's reflective of the fact that there are multiple people working on compliance issues. So at a firm, there may be one chief compliance officer with a number of different compliance managers. So it should allow you to allocate responsibility. So allocate responsibility for oversight of a particular area, but at the same time, allow the centralized control of the CCO to monitor what is being done in different aspects of the firm's compliance program. So now we're going to, in a couple of slides, really sort of talk about some of specific tasks and how you can go about thinking about those tasks. But the big thing I think about that you need to think about is from a software perspective, is organization. And as you know, and we've given you some examples here, there's a lot of complexities in the operation of compliance program, from different aspects of the compliance manual or written compliance procedures, the code of ethics, the monthly, daily, quarterly monitoring program, keeping track of various registration documents, Form ADVs, other similar documents, fund documents, DDQs, investor communications, whatnot. So with all of these various moving parts, an application should really be helping you, first and foremost, with the concept of organization. Second, should be thinking about, when it gets specific, that it formalizes accountability to internal processes. If you think about it, I think as an organization, I think as we grew and evolved, and gotten more sophisticated on the sales side of our business, we implemented the use of a very sophisticated CRM tool. We noticed as a comparison to another software application, it really helped shed a tremendous amount of light on internal processes. Where were we weak? Where were we strong? Where were we engaging in good communications? Where were we missing things? The same thing should be true from a compliance program. It formalizes accountability. There's a one-stop where everything stays. It's a very clear track, and it's very clear if there's a gap or if somebody went off track. When you're not using one centralized location, it can tend to get a bit all over the place where there will be different tools, whether it be spreadsheets or whatnot, and you're not able to really formalize a sense of accountability. So that leads us to the concept of what specific tasks lend themselves to the use of technology or the use of software. Number one is policy and procedure management. Again, around whether your firm has 10 different compliance procedures, a single compliance manual, or a code of ethics, you need a tool through which you can manage the different policies and make sure employees are understanding of what the recent policies are, and most importantly, are checked in with. So how is this done? It should be an application that allows for attestations to be done as new policies and procedures come out and are updated. It should also allow for questionnaires, oversight of employees. We talked about in the first session today the importance of conflicts of interest monitoring. Well, how do you do it? That's the way you do it. You can create conflicts of interest questionnaires, and you can use the application to go out and say on a periodic basis, whether it be quarterly, monthly, whatnot, and say, do you have any touches in your personal life with third-party business counterparties that this firm does business with? Do you have any relationships with a vendor that we use, a fund administrator? Do you have a relationship with any investors that are in the fund? Again, and we can document that in all one centralized place, determine who's answered questions when and what they've asked. Also, from the policy management perspective, pre-approvals or pre-clearances, whether that be around political contributions, whether that be around personal securities transactions or engaging in outside business activities, that's an area that really lends itself because you use technology, it's a centralized place, you can see who's filed what, when they filed it, and if something is open or outstanding. The last area, I think, from policy management and procedure management is training. You could deliver training to a great degree via software applications. I can't say I'm an advocate that it's the sole way it should be done. I think it is important for every compliance program to have an element of in-person traditional training. But in this day and age, and when you want to stay on top of employees on a regular basis, maybe you do once a year compliant training and then more periodic training via an application, whether it be through videos, training videos, or other training programs. Another really specific place that we think that technology and software in particular can play a great role is the creation of a compliance calendar. That we talked about it on a variety of levels, the importance of mapping out your compliance responsibilities, whether you're registered with the SEC and you've got to schedule out your annual reviews or quarterly reviews of personal securities transactions, or email reviews, or compliance issues relevant to the funds you manage, or maybe ERISA participation percentages or blue sky, whatnot. Creating an interactive calendar as your dashboard, as the place where the CCO lives every day, is a fantastic use of technology. We also talked about sort of the increasing globalization of regulatory compliance. That's another big thing. If you had a centralized dashboard where you had calendars that could be integrated and brought apart based on SEC, CFTC, FINRA, FCA, SFC, MAS, you can sort of have a blended approach on how you're dealing with your compliance program, but at the same time be able to see any one specific spot. We've seen, to be honest, it sounds somewhat simplistic, but part of the centralized engine of our actual software tools are built around compliance calendars. Next area we'll talk about where there's specific applicability is really in the concept around code of ethics and personal account dealing. This is an area, frankly, I think as a firm, especially in the US, I think our predecessor firm here in the UK, over a 10-year period, it's a very time-consuming area. When you're reviewing paper and paper statements and paper submissions, it's probably one of the biggest burdens for internal compliance teams. And an area that technology can greatly help is all around personal dealing and reporting. And that will start in the concept of having electronic links to broker accounts where they can report their accounts electronically. They can either do traditional broker links, or we've been successful, and there are other firms that have been successful in doing what we call account aggregator links, where people will use their individualized online credentials to simply link their accounts into a reporting system. And then what you have is a reporting system. You can implement electronic screening. So you can use a restricted list for anything that you have material non-public information on. You can use a holdings list for anything that's in the portfolio. You can do a watch list for anything that's on a watch list by the portfolio team. You can also implement other rules that allow formulas to be put in, and the review is done electronically. Maximum number of trades a month, maximum number of trades a quarter. Holding period requirements. If we say, hey, you've actually going to have to hold on to the security for a 9-month period of time. Also, that we can do anything as it relates to gift and entertainment reporting. And you create through this employee oversight code of ethics tool, similar to what I mentioned earlier. On one side, you'll create a dashboard for a CCO to manage the program. You also want to create dashboards for each employee. So it's one centralized spot. They look at it, and they know these are the attestations I need to make. These are the accounts I need to link. These are the filings I need to make, and it also shows me what I've done. So somebody can't come back to you and say, you have not done something. And you use those portals to then communicate with employees, talking to them about what they should and should not be doing. So employee compliance is probably one of the areas we've seen efficiencies go up 100-fold. I mean, we've frankly noticed it because we have had clients that we've evolved over time, and the amount of time that we as a firm spend on doing the same amount of work in a paper world versus an electronic world, it's frankly astounding. Other areas, specific areas we can think about the application of technology, record keeping. Again, this is areas where, again, email oversight, email archiving, email search, email storage. There are tons of firms out there that have done that. I think that is a no-brainer where we've seen most people go down that route. And then just general record keeping as you're running reports, whether it be reports of a review of marketing materials or somebody's personal securities transactions or an email review, to have a central repository, compliance repository where you store all of that. The last specific area that I will talk about before I get into a relatively brief review of the Cordium products on the software side of the business is workflow management. And this is a way that I think there have been companies out there, frankly, that have been successful outside of the compliance realm who have focused on workflow management without email. The thought process that email can be an incomplete, sometimes inconsistent way to manage workflow. And you can use technology around managing compliance workflow. And we've been very successful in that regard. And if you think about it, we've talked about a number of them. Managing an annual review, when you've got 5 different people working on 5 different aspects of the annual review. Somebody's doing employee interviews on one side. The other person is going a review of all the marketing materials and use during the year. Another person is going to look at personal securities transaction. If they're working off one centralized application where they're going through their work, uploading their work, the review, what was done, what was noted, when it was done, who did it, it's a very, very powerful tool. It can be used for email reviews where we will go out and review emails, not only do it from a compliance team, but maybe pull other pieces in the management into the workflow and say, hey, we're looking at this email. It looks like a strange note. What do you think? Oh, that's not a problem. Great. But it's all captured in one centralized depository. It's not that we have to go then searching for emails 2 years down the line when the firms gets audited. Same thing could be for trade allocation reviews, best execution reviews, and most importantly, and we've seen other firms successful in this, marketing document reviews, where you upload documents to make sure there's consistency and of the identity of the document, and who asked what questions, who had what comments, who had what concerns, and what was done. And that is a key element of it. So with that, I'm going to briefly talk about a number of tools that we actually have at Cordium, and then I'm also, if people can think of any questions, I'm happy to answer any sort of questions that anybody has. The first tool that we have is called ELF. It actually does have a little elf with a pointy hat on it on the screen, and it stands for Employee Level Filings. And this is really the Code of Ethics compliance tool. And this is a tool that allows provides basically compliance dashboards to each employee at a firm around personal dealing, trade pre-approvals, affirmations and questionnaires, again, and we built it in a way you can ask a questionnaire about anything. As the world changes and what the thinking is around certain conflicts of interest, we can always build questionnaires around that. It's where we can deliver training and competency record keeping, conflicts management, annual sign-ups, and general code of ethics attestations. It's an area that it's probably one of the areas of most interest as it relates to our software applications. The next tool we have is what's called Compliance Trak. This is this concept of a dashboard for a CCO. It's built around an interactive compliance calendar that will list a variety of different tasks based on the jurisdictions and what they're in. And it allows them to keep track and upload actual output from the operation of the compliance program. And the last thing that we're going to talk about before I answer any questions and let you off to a break is a new application we've got coming out very shortly called Pilot, Cordium Pilot. This is an enhanced workflow management system. It's got more complex user permissioning, so it allows a large number of users and administrators to be in charge of monitoring. We've got multiple calendar functionality, as well complex search and reporting functions, so we can go in and look at a variety of things from a workflow perspective that have been done as part of the program. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that we have, and it looks like we've got a couple already. First one is the software web-based, or do I need a dedicated software? Generally speaking, software applications out there are both. Cordium software is a web-based application, so you do not need a dedicated software installation. Second question we have is there a break-even point where the expense of a compliance system isn't justified because of the sole number of partners or staff at a firm? That's a good question. I think that's the case. I think what we've done, and I would say, frankly, that most other players in the industry have got a function of the pricing of the software is around how complex the infrastructure is, and one of the biggest functions are number of employees, number of reporters, whatnot. So I think many of the players, including Cordium, have tried to structure it in such a way to ensure that we're doing it in a way that is beneficial to users and keeps the cost for smaller firms down. And I think that's it. With that, I thank you guys for taking your time to listen a little bit about Cordium software and software in general. And we've got the team members around here for the rest of the day. If anybody has any questions, we're more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's just a few minutes early. I think it's probably time for a tea break. We are back in here promptly at 3:50 when we're going to pick up on defining skill in modern asset management. So we're going to have a session around tax, and then we've got a UK regulatory panel to finish the day off at the end of the day. So thanks very much. We'll see you back here at 3:50.